So you're in New Mexico?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we are. It has been a very hectic week and a half, but we are currently in New Mexico driving from Texas to California. Because last week we were at the volleyball tournament. Thanks again I hope people liked the AMA episode, because the reason for it is that we were playing in a volleyball tournament that Joe and I have been training for the last 6 months. So yeah, and it was on Wednesday. There was nothing I could do about it, but yeah, we had a really good time. But last week it was really
How'd it go? How'd the tournament go?
It's funny because we peaked before we even left. So on Sunday, before we went to Florida for the big tournament, we played in a tournament in the organization we've been playing in forever. And Joe and I won our first tournament. So we were super excited about that. And then we fly to Florida and we played together on the Wednesday tournament, which was co-ed 2. So it was Joe and I against the world. And our goal was to win 1 game. And we actually won 3 games and got into the playoffs. Yeah. And actually sent a team home. So we were thrilled about that. And after that, that's when the wheels fell off, because Joe got injured on Thursday. He had a cramp that was so bad that the muscles were really tight that he couldn't even walk on Thursday night. But I know it was bad, and he was really upset. But then the trainers worked on it and they realized that he wasn't actually injured. It was just sore from that really bad cramp. So he ended up playing on Saturday and Sunday. So it was that was kind of a miracle, but it was touch and go, and he didn't get to play on Friday. It was supposed to be, it's 4s. And so it was going to be me, Joe, and then, a guy and a girl that we are friends with from Austin. So luckily our friend Frank, our hero Frank, was just there to hang out. And so he jumped in Joe's place. And then my weekend was a total disaster. We not only didn't win a game over the weekend, but got slaughtered. So we peaked with winning an actual tournament, and then it was just humiliation by the end. So
I mean, but that said, take the win where you can. Yeah.
100%. And the real win was one of the most fun weeks of my entire life. It was being at camp, but instead of having to learn stuff during the day, I was playing my favorite game. And there were 60 of us there from Austin. So they were just friends everywhere.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was amazing. I had the best time. So that's why my voice is a little raspy, because I haven't shut up for a week and a half. But we had just the best time. We're already signed up to go to the next one. So it was
that's
a good
great.
time.
Heaton went to prison.
Yeah, I just got back from prison.
Prison? I thought you guys were giving children weird instruments. It sounds like prison to me.
That's tomorrow.
That's on Thursday. Okay. We're going to fly to Indianapolis to give musical note-shaped Japanese flute toys to junior and high school students. No, my weekend, I drove up to New Hampshire. I was in a debate in New Hampshire. I won. Very good time. And then the following day, I drove up to Portland, Maine. And then on Monday, I spent all day in prison at the Maine Correctional Center and had a blast. It was a really good time. A surprising amount of people that work or are incarcerated in the Maine Correctional Center are listeners of the Political Orphanage. At least one.
What?
Shout out to Mark. Hey, Mark. He listens to our program and he works there. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out here. Don't give me your answer right now. Don't give me your answer right now. If we ever wanted to do a live show at a prison, they would totally do a live show with us. I think that'd be kind of fun. We all get to be Johnny Cash for a day.
Yeah, exactly.
And do a live show. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I'm in. That sounds great.
Oh, great. Excellent. Yeah. Justin?
No, I'm going to hold out theatrically until finally you can melt my heart when we actually book the gig.
Fair. It was great fun. And also I'm really looking forward to doing that episode on the Political Orphanage. I think criminal justice is a big thing. I've been on Team New Scandinavia model for a long time now, and pretty anti the Joe Arpaio model. And I was extremely impressed with everything they're doing in Maine. I think they're really, really doing some awesome stuff.
What are they doing in Maine?
Yeah.
So the standard model in the United States, I think, and I've only been to one prison, but kind of the old default model.
There's still time.
There's still time. The old default model is if you treat people really bad, that'll learn them, and then they won't come back. And that's kind of the Joe Arpaio model from Maricopa County. Joe Arpaio he's sort of the penultimate person in the last 20 years, as far as I know, in terms of this. Joe Arpaio was the
second to last,
the county jail. Because he's now retired. So I don't know who the current.
So there's a new one. He reincarnated like the Highlander.
I think exactly that.
Joe Arpaio's the guy that made people sleep like outside in tents in the Arizona summer.
He did things that would have been against the Geneva Convention to foreign prisoners. He would make the prisoners wear pink shorts to like just embarrass them. They tried to save as much money as they could on food, so they'd oftentimes get green bologna and moldy bread. And they didn't air condition anything, or at least a lot of the housing were tents outside in Arizona, and that was unhoused. So like the rubber would melt off of people's shoes. It was a very bad situation. I think the data is pretty good on this, that even if you just really hate inmates, like if you're kind of taking this Old Testament wrath of God model of like, look, evildoers need to be punished. Even if you're in that camp, it's just cheaper from a taxpayer perspective to not torture people. It's much cheaper to like try and get people rehabilitated. Maine has a lower recidivism rate. Scandinavia has a much lower recidivism rate. I felt really, really safe and comfortable hanging out with who I later found out were a bunch of murderers. There were at least 3 murderers that I was hanging out with yesterday. And I don't know that I'd let them specifically out depending on what their charges were and whatnot. But most of the people that are in there, it's like 90% are eventually going to leave. And when they leave, you want them to be emotionally cogent people that could potentially get a job and become a taxpayer, as opposed to reoffend and injure somebody or steal their stuff and go back to prison. And I think Maine is doing really good work in terms of being able to have an effective prison model.
So they are treating their inmates better. That is the bumper sticker.
Yeah, they've got, yes, they're treating them a lot better. And I saw all the dorms. I saw the intake, which is very prison-y, where it's like beige and loud and clingy. And, you got the metal toilet in a very small room. Yep. But then I saw the dorms, which you kind of build your way up to. They've also they've very much got
if you have good enough behavior, eventually you get a dorm.
So the older model that we've had in the States, including in Maine, as late as 2014 was, look, if you screw up, we put you in solitary confinement. And then if you cut yourself while you're in solitary confinement, we give you more solitary confinement. And I think solitary confinement is like neurologically indistinguishable from torture. It's a torture tactic. And the rationale that was used by prisons was like, look, we do have to have a deterrent tool. If somebody attacks a guard or if somebody, starts riots, there has to be like, we know this is bad, but we have to have some means by which to retain order in the prison. Segregated housing, which is the term for solitary confinement, is the way to do that. Maine has a tiny bit of that. In terms of, maybe if there's a immediate situation where we need to remove somebody, we'll do that, but they're not using it as a punitive tool. Rather, what they do is they're like, look, if you're on good behavior, you eventually just get to move into a dormitory. Like it looks like a dorm room at Northeastern Oklahoma State University. It's pretty similar. And they're like, if you are a contributing member of the community and you're orderly and not causing problems, like you will get these privileges. You'll have a little bit more autonomy. And they have libraries. They're kind of pioneering in terms of like laptops and tablets and things. You can get remote jobs when you're there. It's subject to a lot of oversight and a lot of rules to make sure that people aren't doing anything illegal or definitely not, reaching out to victims to harass them or anything like that. So there's lots of strictures in place, but it's the emphasis is on rehabilitation as opposed to penitence. Yeah.
So what happens if they stab a guard?
If you stabbed a guard at that particular facility, I would guess you'd probably be put in segregated housing for a little bit. I don't know how long that they would put you in there or not, but they'd restrict all the privileges you got. When I talk to people, there are people that are like truly dangerous. There are some like just fundamentally bad people. And I get this from one of the inmates, or I should say a former resident that I've become friends with. That was kind of eye-opening for him, I gather, of like, no, there are just some like truly awful people that need to be permanently kept away from the human population. So those are there, and we got to figure out what to do with them. But we're going to have to figure out what to do with them in any society. For a lot of the people there, though, we can work with them.
So the argument is that the very existence of a solitary confinement is something in that when all you have is a hammer, you're going to find a lot of nails. Philosophy that you're just going to wind up putting more people in solitary confinement than necessarily would necessitate it if you don't have incentives on the other side to reward good behavior.
Yeah, you're going to have
if all there is just this kind of crap prison life, then you might as well act out.
Yes. If you're going to, in this system, you're going to need carrots and sticks. And the older model was to rely primarily on sticks.
It doesn't seem like good food.
You're in prison, and we will make it particularly bad for you unless you straighten up and fly right. And the problem is that because you're already in prison and it's already not very good, that means we just have to make the sticks particularly heinous in order to get your attention. There are situations, I'm now getting into Heat and Wheelhouse, not what I was told by the folks that work there, but I can foresee situations where, hey, this person is literally dangerous at this moment. They're having a psychotic episode. Alternately, maybe there's a credible death threat against them where a gang is going to try to kill them or something. So I could see there being situations where you would need to put somebody in segregated housing. I think the main thing, though, is, are you doing this for a functional, immediate cause, or are you doing this as a form of punishment to try to exact behavioral changes? That's the thing that we need to move away from, is this is a behavioral mechanism that we're using as a lever, because it's just torture. Like we're torturing people to try to get them to straighten up and fly right. And I think deeply inhumane. I don't believe in torture as a concept under any circumstance, but beyond that, it's also just not very effective because it really fucks up the people that undergo it. Like, you're fucked up when you leave 6 months of solitary confinement. You're not going to just become a programmer. You're not going to become a social media coordinator and walk out and go get a job. Like, you're going to have some real issues. So having a better incentive system is going to work out for everybody, including us, the law-abiding taxpayers that don't want to get assaulted by people that are falling into recidivism.
I'm against segregated housing.
Nice.
I'm against most segregations. It's the 90s after all.
Funny thing I'm planning to do, Justin, by the way, on that funny segregation joke that I plan to do.
Let's go.
You know how on Thursdays and Fridays I work at Reason now? Like, I make funny videos. You know this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So they have various placards around there of like, hey, like the Huddle family donated the money for us to have the Huddle room. There'll be a little placard. Thanks, Huddle family. So I plan to make my own placard. There's like a little conference room type thing. It doesn't have anything on it. So I'm going to make a placard that says the Andrew Heaton conference room, and then beneath it, all races welcome. And I think that'll be the funny part, because if they try to take it down, I'll be like, I think all races should be welcome. And I'll focus on that. And turn that into the sticking point. I think that'd be very funny.
Maybe this is why you haven't been in an office for a while. From Austin, Texas, I am Justin Robert Young from a hotel in New Mexico.
I'm Jen Briney.
And from Washington, D.C.,
I'm Andrew Heaton.
And we're not wrong. On this edition of the program, we're going to be talking about the blackouts in Europe and whether or not Amazon is within its rights to reportedly be initially interested in putting tariff prices next to what you would be buying on their website. All that plus your emails. It's good to be back on the horn with you guys. I've missed you terribly.
I missed my boys.
Yeah.
I missed you as well, friends.
It took a little long, Heaton. Took a little long.
Yeah.
Not that we're noting it forever.
Justin,
took
prison changes
long.
a man. Prison changes a man.
I know. Yeah. Now that you're on the outside.
Now that I'm on the outside, it's just
you only do 2 days,
man.
Heaton. You know, day you get in, day you get out.
So technically I did 1 because it was the same day for me.
It was both days. It was both
days for me.
Yeah. We're not going to be doing a first 100 days retrospective, mostly because I feel like we've covered the first 100 days day by day, right? You know, I mean,
we've had a pretty good play-by-play.
I also don't need to relive them. Like, I'm pretty aware of what happened. It's pretty recent. So I'm noticing that all the podcasts I listen to are like, let's rehash all that bad shit that just happened. And I'm like, I'd rather not. So,
yeah, I think in the past, the worth of the rubric was, what did they get done relative to other presidents? And regardless of whether or not you think the actions that have been taken by the Trump 2.0 administration have been good or bad, I don't think anyone doubts the volume. And so there's not really a whole lot of comparisons to say like, well, certainly gotten a lot of shots up. There's certainly a lot happening, but there's not a lot of comparisons, or at least kind of one-to-one comparisons of like, well, he got X amount of EOs signed or Y amount of pieces of legislation signed, which is usually what these kinds of retrospectives are. And this has been, I think, a far more colorful administration.
But in terms of Congress, I think one of the reasons why the 100 days matters, especially when you have the presidency, the House, and the Senate, is like they're expected to kind of hit the ground running and do a lot of things. And even though it felt like a lot happened, that's really not the case in Congress. There's only been 5 things signed into law. So we had the Laken-Riley Act. I did a full episode about that. They funded the government, and then they rolled back 3 Obama era, basically energy efficiency regulations. So if they were hoping to get a ton done in those first 100 days, they failed.
Yeah. All the heat has been on the big, beautiful bill, which continues to matriculate and slowly move through the system. So there's been a lot happening underneath the water, but you are right in terms of things that have actually become law. That is not the case. Now, who knows? I mean, we've heard Memorial Day, we've heard July 4th for, when the big Trump omnibus, thing is going to eventually surface. So at that point, who knows what happens with the Leviathan, but not a whole lot of ledge action happening currently.
No, not really.
All right. So there we go. That's all we got. That's all we got for you. We're going to talk Trump a little bit when it comes to tariffs. Let's look across the Atlantic, huh? A massive blackout plunged nearly all of Spain and Portugal into darkness this week, briefly affecting parts of France and disrupting life for tens of millions. Power has since been restored to most of the Iberian Peninsula, but transportation chaos lingers, with trains suspended and airports overwhelmed. Spanish officials say the outage stemmed from the sudden loss of 15 gigawatts, around 60% of national demand, although the cause remains unknown. Portugal blamed Spain. That's an old sawhorse, citing its reliance on Spanish electricity. Emergency declarations have been issued, elevators have failed, traffic lights have gone out, cities have ground to a halt. Experts warn it could take weeks to identify its root cause. And so I ask you, Jen, who would want to move to Spain?
I knew this was targeted at me. We were in the car when I got the prep sheet today and I saw that question. I told Joe and he belly laughed. He was like, that one's coming straight at you. The reason that is funny, dear audience, I don't know if I've actually told people this, is that this October we are traveling to Barcelona and applying for a digital nomad visa in Spain. So,
in the dark, apparently. So bring a flashlight.
Well, apparently the lights are already back on. It wasn't that long of a thing. It was about 12 hours. They were without power. And honestly,
just a quick 12 hours, just a snap.
Well,
blink and you miss it. 12 hours.
Comparing that to what I dealt with when I lived walking distance from you, Justin, I was out of power for 4 days. So 12 hours.
In a hard freeze and in a natural disaster.
Yeah.
I don't know. What was the natural disaster in Spain? The Vosotros form?
That's kind of wild that we still don't know what the cause is.
That's really what the news is. The news isn't that during some kind of gigantic if things are out for days in a natural disaster, it's one thing. If it's just whoops, it went out. And then, there are the online sleuths, of course.
Yes and no, because what's caused the disaster when I was without power for 4 days is that it was an ice storm. Mm-hmm. The ice collected on the trees fell, took down the power lines. There are things you can do to prepare to prevent things like that from happening. And I was driving down our street on Monday night, and once again, those trees are growing back.
Those trees are still in the power lines.
Boy, are they.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So we've learned nothing in Texas. And I've been watching, because you have a good point. If I'm thinking about spending time in this country, it's how do they deal with situations like this. And it turns out the word that seems to be going around is calm. Everyone is pretty calm. People are like, okay, day off work. There were people singing and dancing in the streets. The people that got stranded at train stations were welcome to stay there. Hotels opened up their rooms to people. It seems like they had systems in place to take care of people. I haven't heard of anyone dying or anything horrible just yet. So when I compare it to what we dealt with in Texas and the lack of lessons learned, like, I'm looking at the Spanish government going like, seems like you did okay by your citizens.
With a mystery half-day power outage?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they'll figure it out eventually, but yeah,
I mean,
that's impressive to me too, where you don't know the cause and yet you're still able to solve it. And here we are less than 24 hours later and all the lights are back on in 2 countries. So, they did something right. They were able to fix it, even though they didn't know the cause. So
or they know the cause and they don't want to say it.
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I don't even want to speculate. Like, I don't know what the cause is. Like, I'll wait for them to say it. But at this point, from what I've seen,
they should say Portugal. That would be the smart move.
Yeah. They're actually, they're both kind of saying France.
Idiot with a slightly different name like Pedrar.
Yeah.
Put the wrong dryer into the wrong plug and look what happened. Thanks a lot, Lisbon.
Actually, as far as finger pointing is concerned, I've seen some fingers pointed at France, which is hilarious to me because the Spanish and Portugal grids apparently are well connected to each other, but there's just a few connections to France and they're still just like, oh, it's that one connection in France. So it'll be interesting to see if that had anything to do with it, but we don't know. But I am still going to Barcelona and I'm still applying for my visa. This isn't scaring me back to Texas just yet, Justin.
No, I want you there. I want you to be on the ground and figure it out.
I want you to have a guest room so I can
October 28th, I'll be there.
Yeah. So no, the online sleuths, of course, have pointed out that very loudly Spain announced that they were on an all green grid like a month ago, and then a month later they have a mystery power outage.
I mean, I was looking down that rabbit hole too, and they're not blaming that either. And actually, there was a long list of this was The Guardian, of course, so they're pretty liberal in this regard. But they were pointing out that the power outages in the United States, and there was a few in London, like all of those are fossil fuel connected. So until we have a cause, blaming renewables just doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
Yeah. Heaton, what do you think?
In terms of why it happened, or who would want to live in Spain?
Either. Let's start wherever. Yeah. You really like ham. We can start there.
Spanish people sleep in, Andrew. I think you'd fit in well.
I like Spain. I've been twice, like same trip. I flew in and out. So I went to Madrid and then I went to Barcelona. I thought people were super friendly. I really like Spanish culture. I love that at night people will be dancing. You've got lots of public dancing. I thought that was charming. And there's lots of good things about Spain. I really like Spain. In terms of who would want to move to Spain, the question de rigueur, the answer is Americans that are retired or work remotely. That is the key bit there. Like Spain's great. Jen, I think it's a wonderful decision for you to go there. I hope you won't be there for too long because I want to spend time with you in the States, but I totally get why you want to move over there. But we can kind of subdivide it into the people that leave Spain and the people that go to Spain. About 30,000 Americans live in Spain. The majority of them, as I understand it, are remote workers or are retired. It's a great place to live if you have income outside of Spain. Then it's fantastic because as an American, particularly if you're like the top 10%, you've got like a lot more money and all the cool stuff that Spain offers. Conversely, there's 87,000 Spaniards that live in the United States. So there's a lot more Spaniards that come to the United States than Americans that go to Spain. When you factor in the size of our country versus the size of Spain, it's a rate of about 20%. There are about 20 times as many people coming to America than going to Spain. And we've got way more restrictive immigration than Spain does. It's a lot easier to move to Spain. Jen's going to have a much easier time getting a remote worker visa to live in Spain than a Spaniard would have over here. And yet there's way more Spaniards that are coming to the United States than the other way around. So there are lots of things that are enviable about Spain. I like their train system. I think Jen would back me up on that. They've got a great train system. They do have a very
when
weak
it doesn't
economy.
shut down because of a 12-hour
It doesn't shut down because of the economy. They do have a weak economy, and it's if you're worried about getting a job, Spain's kind of been a difficult place the last few years. So I have a lot of Spanish friends, and the reason I have a lot of Spanish friends is because I spend time in Scotland. And there's just like kind of a generational exodus that's occurred from Spain. They had, when I graduated from college, the unemployment rate for people under 30 was about 50%, and it was 50% for about a decade. I'm trying to remember my stats here, so maybe I'm off by a little bit, but I'm very confident when I say that unemployment for young people has been horrible in Spain for about 20 years now. So a lot of people leave. There's been a brain drain problem. A lot of people go to Scotland or America or other places. So there are issues there. But in terms of if you're living abroad and you can keep your American income and live in Spain, I think it would be fantastic to live there. I think great culture and all the benefits of American income paired with cool European lifestyle. I think it's a great combo.
I think it's genius for them too, because if you look at people like Joe and I, we would be not taking any jobs from their people, but like taking money that we make elsewhere and spending it in their country. So it makes sense to me why they're doing the visa. And just, Andrew, you said that you hope that you'll still see us around. We're getting the visa so that we don't have this 90-day restriction, because by the time we schlep us and the dog over there and having to stay for just 90 days, that's annoying. We're planning on moving back to Austin next spring for at least 4 to 5 months. So it's like, we're still going to be around.
Great.
But this way, when we do cross,
I don't know. You might fall
seas,
under the charms, the Spanish charms. You never know. You might go native.
I think we absolutely will. But I love Austin in the spring. I love playing volleyball with my friends, but I know that Austin in the summer, it's like playing volleyball on the surface of the sun. I never, ever want to do it again. So I know I have to leave.
Austin weather is intolerable. If I weren't too weak for suicide, I would end it.
I was gonna say my thing. I'll skip it. Jen, there's a listener of mine who's a fan of yours that lives in Spain and wanted me to get in contact with you in terms of like he knows the ins and outs of how to immigrate and stuff like that. So if you ever want that, I'd be happy to put you in contact.
Yeah, later this summer, that'd be good.
Yeah. Anyway, Justin, like my takeaway is like, if you're American, go live in Spain. It sounds great. If you're Spanish, you should probably come to America.
Well, the locals have had a bit of a pushback, at least with the digital visas. There has been, and I don't know how much of this winds up just filtering through because it has a morality tale for the American eyes that it is surfaced to algorithmically, but there were these mobs of people in certain areas of Spain that would have squirt guns and would try to spray tourists because they were
Barcelona.
Was it Barcelona?
Yeah.
Because they were in Airbnbs that otherwise the locals would have. And so there has been a pushback. I do think in general, a lot of the EU, you've seen governmental responses to exactly the phenomenon that you talked about, Heaton, where there's a brain drain from slower economies to stronger economies. Yeah. And there's a reason why they are trying to get people into Spain with money. There's a reason why my wife got citizenship in Croatia, because they desperately want anybody who has cash to want to be there. And so bringing in people from America or from other parts of Europe to come down there, as opposed to their young people going to Germany, going to the UK, going to France, going to these big cities. That's a big, that is a long-term issue. And I wonder if it's something that, in the ever-growing interconnectivity of Europe over the last 30 years is something that, really was thought through, or at least like has been a net good for some of these smaller countries, because the unemployment is crazy. The
unemployment's nuts. And
when I was in 50% Sicily,
for under 30 is that's dismal.
I don't know what the unemployment is in Sicily, but I know this. I went out walking on a Wednesday night, and I was in apparently a hipper area, Palermo. That place was assholes to elbows. Like it was like Disney World. Like it was insane. And it was all young people who obviously were able to get shit-faced on a Wednesday, which means you probably don't have a job on Thursday.
Well, you got two different European models, right? Like you have very you have robust government involvement in Europe, but it tends to be on the back end or the front end. Scandinavia is on the back end. The Mediterranean's on the front end. So in Scandinavia, you have like a Heaton model where you have pretty low regulatory hurdles. It's easier to open businesses. You don't have nearly as much labor restrictions. You may not even have a minimum wage. And you have higher taxes and you have redistribution through welfare. So like I would prefer that. That's my kind of thing, right? Whereas like in Spain, you have a really tightly regulated labor market. And so they're trying to deal with things at the front side of it. I think I don't know as much about Sicily. I would not be surprised if that were the case. France, similar situation. Their unemployment's not as bad, but they have a really, really tightly regulated labor market. And so you're going to have those variations. And like on a generational level, like in Spain, they got kicked into the teeth. If you're younger, it's very difficult for you to get onto to get traction in your career, which is why they're having this brain drain problem.
Yeah. But that's not what's causing the issues in Barcelona with the squirt guns and the anti-tourist backlash. It's all been housing. That's the issue for them. So Spain has done two things recently. One is that they're cracking down on a lot of illegal Airbnbs because they're supposed to be permitted, and most of them, from what I understand, are not. So that's going to cut down the supply of short-term Airbnbs quite a bit. And then the other one is they killed a visa. It was an investment visa. So if you invested like $500,000 and bought some kind of property, then you were allowed to stay. They've killed that entirely. So what they're trying to do is make it so that their housing supply is reserved. Like they want tourists to stay in the hotels where they're supposed to. And they want people like me to be getting apartments and like staying for, 4, 6 months, a year, whatever. And they don't want rich people buying up all their houses. So they're taking steps in that direction, but I haven't heard of any digital nomad visa backlash in terms of employment, because again, like we can't compete with them. There is one way though.
How would they know? You're just a white person at a cafe. Do you think the squirt gun mob is going to ask questions before they start blasting?
Americans are so loud. Like that's what I've realized going out overseas. They know that you're American just by the volume of your voice. And I think Joe and I, one of the things that helps us a lot, like when we were in Portugal, people were asking us for directions because we bring the dog. So we're actually really good at fitting in. We buy our clothes when we're in Europe and we have the dog. So we look more European, but in a lot of cases, the reason Americans are experiencing this is because they're loud, obnoxious, they're wearing jeans and like,
so they deserve it.
It's not they deserve it. We just stick out like sore thumbs.
If they didn't want it, they wouldn't dress like that.
I mean, if you want to fit in a place, you can buy the local clothes, and we don't. So we're easy to spot.
I look like a British imperialist everywhere. There's no country I could go to outside of Britain and Germany where people are like, look at that guy. He's here to buy land. That's like if I go to Portugal or Spain, where people are really nice to me, no one ever thinks I'm local. I have a painful British horse face. I look way too Anglo to blend into a hot person country like Spain or Portugal.
Well, and when you're not looking British, you're wearing cowboy hats lately. So it's even more so that you're like some...
Yeah, but okay, if I wear like I don't know, Armani t-shirt, what the fuck do Italian people wear? Like I still look like a claymation character compared to all those beautiful bronze skinned people. Whenever I go to Italy, I just apologize. I'm like, I'm sorry for making your country uglier while I'm here.
Jesus
I'm so sorry. I won't be here for very long. I won't touch any of your women. I'm sorry.
I don't think that's necessary.
You've got, by the way, like I've been tempted at times to try to buy a place in Edinburgh because I'm over there so much. It doesn't really make any financial sense for me, because if I did it, I wouldn't have the money to buy a place in America, which I've never done before. I don't own a home at all, so I should probably buy a home where I live. But like I've been tempted, like, okay, is there a way I can make this work where like maybe I get a place, but it's like a 4-bedroom place and I rent it out. And that pays for, and then I just take it for 3 months a year. And I haven't really been able to square that circle, in part because Edinburgh is really hostile to Airbnbs. And it's the regulatory framework there is not super clear to me. And it looks like they might change it at any moment. So what I would be very happy to do is I would love to buy an apartment in Edinburgh and rent it out to college students with the understanding that when the semester ends, they leave and I take residence from like, May to September, and then I'll come back or I'll find new college students. I would be very, very happy to do that. But the Edinburgh regulatory framework is like, no, you have to do it for a minimum of a year. and then you have to do month by month until discharged. And I'm like, well, that won't work. And it ends up being this thing where I could really, really get left holding the bag. So I'm just like, nah, not gonna bother. Which I guess is the point, to stop people from me like doing that. But I don't know. I think kind
is
of
that
what
good though?
about.
I feel like you wanted to play by the rules. Like, is discouraging?
I think no.
A good idea?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, obviously, I've got skin in the game here. I would say kind of similar to what Jen's talking about. If I were a Scot with a pocketbook, I would look at Andrew Heaton and say this is a net positive. He comes over to our country. He comes over for 6 weeks to 3 months. He's only spending money that he gets in America from Americans. He's not competing with anybody for jobs. He doesn't cause any problems. So he's a net positive, in addition to just the fact that I'm like a nice, fun associate Scot in a cowboy hat that adds to the local flavor of the community. There's I find in Scotland that they tend to have this attitude that housing prices go up because of what do I call them? Like speculators. They've got this, like it's speculators. They're driving up the cost of housing. It's all these dumb speculators. And I'm like, it's the same as everything else, gang. It's supply and demand. If you've got a lot of people that need to live in a place or want to live in a place, and you don't have sufficient housing, then the price is going to go up. So there's going to be a relationship between tourists coming in, but also Edinburgh's economy is really dependent on tourism. So like it's one of those things where you're not going to get all the money coming in from tourism if that's where you want significant amounts of your money to come in, and also try to restrict the amount of people that are visiting the city. That's just not going to work. So I in their case, I would prefer that they just build more housing. I think where it gets into a problem in Edinburgh that we don't really have in the States nearly as much is if I'm in Oklahoma or I'm in Austin, Texas, or almost anywhere in the United States, and someone goes, oh, okay, yes, we need more housing. We need more density, but our neighborhood has a particular aesthetic to it that we don't. No, it's bullshit. People in America are almost certainly lying about that 90% of the time because they just don't want to have poor people in their neighborhood, or they don't want to threaten their property by having poor houses in it. It really, in Edinburgh, though, I'm like, yeah, they kind of have a point. Like, these are like 18th century buildings. I don't know if I want to bulldoze this Georgian masterpiece to make way for, 5 more stories. There is kind of a density issue there that they're dealing with in a way that I think is a little bit more nuanced than what we typically have in like Houston or Austin or Guthrie.
But there certainly is a class of American, and you've seen this in varying different ways of, people with money that want to travel to Europe, Americans that are they regularly travel abroad, and there's certainly a desire for it. I think the question is where the rubber meets the road by the time that it gets over there. I guess when the rubber meets the wrong side of the road.
If you're having to live and work in a country, America remains top dog for people to want to move to. There's a lot more
like globally.
But
like, everybody hates their hometown, and that's why
everybody hates their hometown.
Everybody fetishizes places that are not America.
Yeah, but if you're like, I am going to get a job in the local economy, the American local economy is great. And there's problems with it. There's all sorts of things I would change, but like in terms of just your ability to get a job and get money and start a business, like we're doing great. That's why a lot more people are moving here than vice versa. If you have the ability to maintain that economic life and live wherever you want, then it's great, because you could find a place that's super cute, that's much cheaper than the United States, and you're playing with American money in a foreign environment. That's terrific. There's all sorts of great places to go.
I mean, but there's more to life, I think, than getting a job and making the most money. Like, what you say is true, but I want to be able to get around without a car, and I want to feel safe on the street. I don't want to. I was in a truck stop yesterday, and there were a couple dudes there where I just felt like these guys might have guns, and like I'm just kind of slightly uncomfortable in a lot of situations here in the United States in a way that I'm not over there. So it's like, yeah, financially, America
you feel right at home at Spanish truck stops?
I think why would I be at a truck stop? I could take the goddamn train. I don't have to be at the truck stop. Like, I hate the fact that I'm going from major city to major city and I have no way to get there without driving the car. Like, it annoys me, and I felt unsafe all day yesterday. I'm going to feel unsafe all day yesterday. Like, I know how dangerous it is to travel by car. So I just think quality of life, like, Europe's got some things figured out that we just haven't. And then when it comes to like what's happening right now, I mean, people don't even want to visit the United States because of our Customs and Border Patrol taking people and locking them up for 10 days for no reason. And so it's like, forget about people moving here. We have people who don't even want to visit here. So I think our calculations are going to be changing quite a bit. They already are, but it'll be interesting to see where we are 3 years from now when it's like the comparison of the US to other places. Like I think the 80% Spanish coming this way, I think we might see a reversal of that because this is becoming a scary place.
I don't disagree, by the way.
A big exodus to España, you think?
I mean, I think we're just going to see fewer people trying to come to the United States from outside the United States. This is whether it's fair or not, but at this point, I do think it's fair. People are afraid to come here. And the more people are afraid to come here and the more you get these stories of people like...
that's just not a thing, that's a real thing? That'll bear out?
Yes, I think it's bearing out every time you get a new story of a German hiker who's put in prison for 10 days for no reason.
Surface to people that are mad about it?
No, it's not surface when people are being imprisoned because there's a visa issue. Like, I understand taking someone at the airport and being like, there's something wrong with your visa, you need to get on the next plane home. But we have repeated stories. We have Canadians, we have Germans, we have a couple from New Zealand. We have people who are coming here and being imprisoned, and it's scaring people. Even if it's just overnight, they're strip searching these people before they go to these detention centers. And every time there is a new story like this, it is going international, and the numbers are backing it up. Tourism is tanking here in the United States, and there is a reason for that. And I don't think it's overreaction. Like, if you're going to plan an international vacation, why would you plan to come to a place that might throw you in a scary detention center? Like, I would just rather go to Canada or anywhere else.
I mean, I did that on Monday.
Go
a scary detention center.
Yes, but not the way we're doing it to other people. Like, I know you guys are trying to tell jokes here, but we're doing terrible things to people and they're scared, and I think it's justified. So, and our tourism numbers are showing that what I'm saying is true.
I don't disagree. I would be surprised if the fundamentals of the economy are that different. I do think the economy is going to be worse if we maintain this weird Trump tariff tantrum stuff. And we do the Swiss cheese thing where we have high tariffs. We start cronyist exempt. Like, I think that will affect the economy. I would be surprised if like it reversed, like the median income in the United States is like 74,000. The median income in Spain's like 40,000. So I'd be surprised if that flipped. But you know, like Jen's right. Tourism numbers are down. Like that's a real thing. There's a demonstrable economic effect that's affecting people's livelihoods. There's also a non-economic effect. I don't disagree with what Jen said earlier, that life is more than economics. It's a big chunk. And it becomes more and more important the lower you go on the economic totem pole. But as we get up, we climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's lots of other stuff, and being afraid to visit a place, having people afraid to visit America. These are not inconsequential phenomena to occur.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/we're not wrong is where you need to go if you want to support this program. We're going to talk about the normalization of the 4 a.m. power routine on the Patreon.
Video people will know why I just laughed. Andrew's eyes just rolled so far back into his head that they're basically now like in his ears.
I think people could probably hear my eyes rolling like fucking marbles as Justin said that. 4 a.m. Jesus. Did we lose a war? Is it even worse than I thought? Did the jackboots come in and make us wake up before 5?
It is a Wall Street Journal trend piece. Guys, you've already gotten the little amuse-bouche of it. Get the main course by jumping over that paywall as fast as you can. Patreon.com/we're not wrong.
I'll add to sweeten the deal. This is historically, usually if there's an argument, it's either me and Jen arguing or Justin just trying to piss off Jen. That tends to be where the friction occurs.
Yeah.
The morning person thing is a long-standing grudge match I have with one Justin Robert Young. So if you want to hear me fight Justin Robert Young, you're where to do it is
fuck
past
me
the paywall.
for? I'm not trying to fight. You're allowed to wake up whenever you want. The Wall
I
Street
go
Journal,
to Orange Theory at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wall Street Journal just wrote a trend piece.
The paywall. Save it for the paywall, you magnificently efficient early riser.
Oh, my God. The White House criticized Amazon for reportedly planning to display Trump-era tariffs on product listing, calling it a hostile and political act. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt questioned why Amazon didn't flag inflation under Biden or urged Americans to buy American. Amazon clarified that the tariff labels would only be under consideration for its budget-focused Amazon haul and not the main site. The announcement followed a report that Amazon might show tariff-related costs on product pages, echoing similar moves by Chinese e-commerce retailers Shein and Temu. Leavitt also cited past Amazon compliance with Chinese censorship, suggesting a deeper concern over the company's ties to Beijing and motives behind the pricing display. Now, heads up for everybody. Usually, I try to get these prep sheets done so our distinguished panel can read up on them if they'd like the day before. This was a particularly fast moving story. And for other reasons, I had to get this done earlier in the day. So this story has changed significantly since we first listed it. Almost immediately. The way that this story broke was Punchbowl, which is a very, very well-read newsletter in DC. They have a tech vertical. And so in there, I'm a subscriber to Punchbowl News. In the Punchbowl News main newsletter, which everybody in DC reads, especially in politics, one of their little subscribe to our tech newsletter blurbs was that Amazon was considering this. That sets off all of this. And so Caroline Leavitt goes out during her press availability and says it's a hostile and political act. Amazon almost immediately says this is not for our main site. This is for our Temu and Shein competitor, Amazon Haul. And then almost immediately after that says this is absolutely not going to happen. And also in the article, the CNBC article that we based this on, they said that Temu and Shein are also listing tariff surcharges. I went on Temu and Shein to try to see this. I could not replicate it, but I'm sure it has happened. And so with all that context there, that this is something that is, at least according to Amazon, is not going to happen, let's just treat it as a hypothetical. Heaton, is all fair in love and cheap Chinese wares?
Yes, of course it is. I am disturbed by the fact that the Republican Party, which did a magnificent job of lying about the whole premise that the government should stay the fuck out of the economy for most of my life, has now come around and gone, actually, we want the president of the United States to badger private businesses into doing what the government wants. We want an interventionist. I'm not going to put this on the Republicans. Trump is an interventionist president who wants to order the private sector around. This is how you display your prices is not the business of the government. That's unless you're lying about it, you're committing fraud. But if you want to say this is how much the meal costs, here's the sales tax, that's your prerogative. That's on the private side of the ledger here. And this is an example of the president badgering a company into not being able to display things the government itself was doing, of the government going into the private sector and making them knuckle under in order to not make the government look bad. I am disturbed by this. I want the government to do that kind of Scandinavian model, which is largely stay out of people's business unless it's really an important thing, and then take money on the back end and make sure that nobody goes below a certain level of poverty. That's what I want. What we're getting is the president ordering people around like full-on mercantilists. Like, we're moving into this weird cronyist thing now, like where we were going to have high tariffs, and now it's high tariffs unless you kiss Trump's ass. So if you're able to muster sufficient social capital that you can get your business exempted or you can get your industry exempted, and you are able to, if you can't do it, you're really screwed now, because you're now having to compete with everybody else in terms of money, and only some people have that hurdle. That's where we're going in terms of the economy. And then when Amazon, I think understandably, goes, a lot of people are not that sophisticated in terms of their economic analysis. They're about to see shit increase significantly in price. Rather than have people get mad at us and think that we just became greedy, we're going to show them where the money's going. I think that's very legitimate. And then to have the president,
it is political though, right?
Yeah. You're allowed to be political as a private actor.
It is trying to affect a political outcome. They did not do it when Trump first hiked the Chinese tariffs or when Biden left in the Chinese tariffs.
Yeah, the first time he hiked the tariffs was not nearly as high as it is right now.
That's true.
Trying to, from a political calculus, I think trying to do a Trump tariff display in Trump Admin 1 would have been a lot of squawking for not enough traction. I don't know. Maybe like maybe I would have done it as a principled free marketeer. I would have been like, how dare they put a thing on there that says Trump import tax on everything? Maybe I would have done that. I think logically they looked at it and went, this is not worth the hassle. The squeeze is not worth the juice. This time around, having what are we up to now? Like 125%, 150% tariffs reciprocally.
145% is
that's a pretty high tariff.
It is.
Yeah. And so if you have 70% of your goods sourced from China on Amazon, that's a big number there. And companies can get political. Now, it might be irritating. It may not be in your best interest. Like you might be Nike and go, we're going to make Colin Kaepernick the poster boy for Nike. And maybe consumers will find it irritating. Maybe they won't. You have the option to do that. Your private citizens and conglomerations of private citizens, whether they're a nonprofit or an advocacy group or a for-profit corporation, maintain all of their aggregated individual rights, which involves being able to protest the government or talk about how the economics of my situation works. So yes, they can absolutely do that.
So you would agree with Caroline Leavitt that it was a hostile and political act?
Sure. And the president should not have been trying to intervene in the economy and presumably threaten them to the point where they stopped exercising those rights.
I don't know if that would be the way that I would describe how things went down.
So what do you think
Amazon caved
immediately. Trump called Jeff Bezos and they just had a chat. And Jeff Bezos went, you're such a great guy. I'm just not going to do it.
The way that I had understood, number one, Bezos and Trump have been in contact a lot over the last few months, according to reporting. So the fact that they talked to each other isn't necessarily a sign that this was a house on fire situation. The way that I read the reporting was that this was more Bezos trying to explain to Trump that this was never a thing to begin with than Trump saying, you better change this immediately. The way that Amazon corporate reacted was this was it didn't even read to me like a trial balloon. It read to me like something that was out there on, again, it wasn't even the main punch bowl vertical. It was something that wound up going viral because it was excerpt into the political punch bowl vertical, which makes me think it's more of a tempest in a teapot. Where I'm mostly interested is the bounds of economic patience are beginning to fray in this trade war that Trump has brought on. And they are sensitive to it. The White House is sensitive to it because they know it's not a position that they want to be in.
It's deeply unpopular even at Fox. Yeah, it makes sense that they're unpopular. I think where they've kind of like maybe got a little bit of a thing is Leavitt went, how come you didn't do this with inflation under Biden? Okay, fair. The problem with that is I think the majority of inflation came from printing money. It came from injecting M2 capital into M2 money, right? That's the majority of it. But it wasn't all of it. Some of it was supply chain stuff. Some of it was energy effects going on from pipelines being destroyed in Ukraine. Like it was multifactorial. It would be difficult, I think, from a labeling perspective to go, inflation's happened and 80% of this particular product is inflationary from monetary expansion. So we're just going to put that in there. Plus there's pull demand inflation that happens too, where like this is where a lot of the stuff goes on, where a company will go, oh, everybody has more money now. Well, we're going to raise our prices. Yeah. Like, so it's like, okay, how do I it's the proximate cause is printing money, but there's an actor that's acting upon that willfully decided to do it. So that's a situation where I don't think it's as clear what the path is on who's culpable for it, even though I would say the government caused the majority of inflation. It's just harder to do. Whereas this time around, it's like, yeah, it's the tariffs. You can look at it.
Let's also understand Amazon's position. Amazon is not a regular ass store. Amazon's not Macy's. Amazon's not Sears, where they are buying a bunch of stuff and then putting it up in their windows and then you buy stuff. Amazon, by and large, which again, this was never about Amazon, the main site. The main site, people that sell on Amazon are 90% other vendors that are just using the website as a place to sell because the volume is so high. 10% is what Amazon makes and creates, oftentimes knocking off popular sellers on the other side. And they would then be setting the prices for that kind of stuff. So them listing a tariff thing there would be more where you would see it, but that's not happening. Amazon Haul is a competitor to Temu and Shine. Temu and Shine are American-facing web stores that are direct portals for Chinese manufacturing. So you order a thing, it is incredibly cheap, and then it comes over to America directly. There are many ways that you could deal with this kind of stuff. The biggest is the de minimis exceptions. If you lowered that so it would make retail purchasing more painful, then you could probably stamp out what some in America believe is artificially bringing down the pricing on some of these, kind of more disposable things. But that's a whole different argument. Amazon Haul, I'm assuming, is much like Temu and Shine in that it is an American-facing web portal for Chinese manufacturing. So the more interesting layer here is, I wonder, because I know China is very much on a offensive to make this as painful as possible to the American consumer, how much they are requiring or pushing for their American-facing web portals to make this as loud as possible, because these prices are going to go up. The existential, or the very existence of these kinds of sites are very much up for grabs now, because even if the tariffs come down, you might have something that changes in terms of these de minimis restrictions. But I don't know, that to me is the actual look at this is more interesting than the general hypothetical, which is where everybody went.
Sure.
That it's like, wait a minute, why is Amazon, like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, well, then you should have a Buy American button too. It's like, none of that was really even talked about with this. This was there's plenty to be fascinated by on the future of Shine and Temu and Amazon Haul.
You know what? The Buy America button's not a horrible idea. I think it would be stupid. But if you want to do virtue signaling economically, noting that like half the stuff we make in the country uses parts we source from other places, like fine. Like, have a Buy America button that you can do. And again, half the shit will end up being lug nuts that we take from Malaysia that some guy in Indiana, that's fine. Okay, if that works, go for it. If I'm understanding your objection correctly, please correct me on this, Justin. Mm-hmm. You're saying like Temu and these other companies, they're Chinese companies with an American portal. And so it's a Chinese company that is going, they're doing this as kind of informational warfare. Okay. The fact that they're foreign doesn't really change my opinion very much on this. Like, it's not the job of private companies to make the president not look like a jackass. If the government does something fucking stupid, the private companies, whether they're foreign or not, are welcome to bring it up to the consumer's attention. I'm fine with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's like, Justin, you said before that, or Trump was saying that listing these would be a political act. Well, I think not
Caroline
listing
Leavitt
it
said that. Yeah.
Well, on behalf of the Trump administration is saying it's a political act. I think not doing it is a political act, because every time you buy something on Amazon, there's a line there for taxes. They separate that out and say, this is what the government is charging. And this is one, tariffs are very, very similar. This is a choice that they're making. And so, for the last, I've had this backpack for 5 years. It's, but I've been using it the whole time at this volleyball tournament. It has held up so well. It's called Tripped Travel Gear. It's a couple that designed the backpack that they wanted to exist. And they're so successful. They did packing cubes.
Is this branded content?
No, I'm just letting you know. Can you just let me finish anything today, dude? I have this backpack that I love. I bought it because I like these people. I want to support these people, right? They're the people that I keep thinking about in this, because this backpack that I bought 5 years ago that I really like was probably like $40. And I don't know which country it's coming from, but these tariffs are going to hit. And so now they're going to have to raise their prices possibly by, 150%. And they're going to get punished by their customers, because Amazon, where they sell their products, isn't separating out that cost, isn't saying, well, Tim and Finn are making the same amount of money, but this extra cost is being caused by Donald Trump. So I think Amazon, as a favor and as something that is good faith to the sellers, should be separating that out. And because of political pressure, they're not showing that separation the way they do with taxes. So I think that's the political move. Andrew looks very satisfied with me right now.
I'm so happy right now. That you're,
well, it's all about transparency.
Yeah. I'm just like, anytime that we can have a Heat and Briny co-sponsored economic bill, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
So you would say just a blanket like you should just list a Trump tariff thing, like programmatically, if Amazon was just for everything you purchased, there should be a percentage line for Trump tariffs.
I mean, I don't think they have to call it that. They can call it the import fee or whatever it is, but whatever that percentage is, because it's coming from that particular country, I think the customers should know exactly what that is. I think they should know that it's not Tim and Finn that made that decision, because I think their business is in an existential crisis right now, and that's not fair. And they have no choice with how Amazon displays their prices. They don't have the choice to say, we want to show the import fee.
Should they have done it with higher gasoline prices, like when gasoline prices go up and therefore it makes the shipping more expensive?
I mean, if there's a gas tax that is causing a higher price, like sure, but I don't think that's apples to apples.
There are gas taxes.
Yeah. And you can list that separately if you want to, like that's fine. But I don't think like inflation or anything like that, that's not a choice that is being made. It's not an extra tax that is being placed on these products. This is an extra tax. And that's why I think it should be listed.
Justin, to flip it, I would be fine if 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it was, if Amazon or other places had a thing that popped up that went, the government printed an incredible amount of money. The money supply's expanded, and that's making stuff cost more. I would have no problem with that. I think it would be harder to calculate it because there's multiple factors going on. But like if they wanted to do that, or to flip it, Justin, let's use a completely different example here. For listeners in about, 30 states, if right now you go on Pornhub.com, you're going to see a lady pop up that goes, legislators in your state have decided there's going to be age verification laws. We think this is a bad idea, so we're just not operating in your state anymore. Totally their prerogative to go, look, this isn't on us. This is because your state legislature is a bunch of fucking Puritans. Like that, I'm fine with that. I think it's fine if businesses want to highlight dumb or dumb political decisions. I think part of it, though, is just a calculation of, is the juice worth the squeeze? So like eggs cost a lot. I've not researched all of this, but I think it probably has to do with like bird flu and things like that. So it's probably a supply side issue. If it's a temporary phenomenon where eggs cost a lot, egg sellers might go, okay, eggs are going to cost a lot. People are going to hate it. Some people are going to think, because we all got greedy, egg prices went up, but we know that egg prices are going to go back down again when we get more chickens and we can weather the storm. They may not do anything, right? But if there's some ongoing problem that is beyond their control where eggs cost twice as much as they previously did because there's an egg tax, then they might go, we need to let people know this isn't us. Like this is not a temporary situation. Like egg prices have doubled and it's because there's a 100% egg tax. So we're going to come in there. So part of it is a practical element. And then I guess part of it too, Justin, is part of it could be political or partisan, let's say. Mm-hmm. It could be that Amazon folks are just, they like Democrats more than Republicans, and they are easier on Democrats when they do stupid shit. That's entirely possible. It's still their prerogative whether or not they want to highlight that. Like there's no obligation that if you're going to get political, you have to be even-handed. If they did, the pundit field would be 90% shot. But as it is, you have the ability to pipe in.
I'm just gonna push back a little bit on the idea that this is anything like the idea of putting an inflation fee on. I don't think this would be the same thing because, first of all, we've been money printing like crazy since the George W. Bush administration. And so to say that it's something extraordinary in the Biden administration, like that money printing was any different from what W did and what Obama did and what Trump did during COVID.
A lot more. It was significantly more. Like the amount of money in circulation jumped by like 30% in a year. It was
but that was the CARES Act, which was signed by President Trump. So it's like, if you're going to place blame when you do that, like I understand that inflation is caused by that, but you can't have a direct correlation between this is the money that was printed and this is why your backpack is more expensive. This is different.
I think it's a cleaner one. I agree. Like I think it was principally money being printed, right? But I'll agree with you that it's more complicated. There are more moving parts and there are more layers to it. Whereas with an import tax, you can just look at it. Like I agree. It's more direct. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. And I'm happy to put the money supply stuff on the Republicans too. I don't really give a shit. I'm not swinging for the Republicans or the Democrats. I think the printing the money was the problem. I don't care who did it.
But that's why, like, I don't think you can put a number like down to a penny. This is what you are being charged caused by that. I think you can do that with a percentage that is being caused by a tariff.
That's true. If we lived in a universe where the economy was exactly the same at all times, it never expanded or changed, then you could calculate inflation down to the penny, because it would just be a question of the money supply. We don't have that. We have a dynamic economy. Inflation is part art and science. Like when we talk about, TVs are 90% cheaper than they were in the 50s when you account for inflation and stuff like that. It's because products are changing in terms of how costly they are to make, and they're doing it at different rates. It's not as if everything is affected at the same time by all of that. It is more complicated. That's true. While I would say that with inflation, the principal effect is the money printing, it's going to affect different industries at different times. And there are also going to be other factors that are going on as well. And then there are going to be some things where maybe I am affected by general monetary inflation, but I've also made my microchips cheaper, so they're rising in price slower than something that's more static. It is more complicated. I don't contest that. It's difficult to just go, this is a 1-to-1 ratio that we can easily pick out.
I will say that the cleanest place for which you can apply tariff stuff would be direct retailing from these Chinese factories like Shein and Temu and Amazon Haul. Like that is the cleanest way. Because if you're doing component parts or you're doing other stuff that is imported, number one, as Andrew Heaton very adeptly pointed out, some stuff is exempt, some stuff isn't, some stuff, you have the fentanyl tariff, but you don't have the 145% tariff. We're always one call from between Trump and Xi away from it dropping from 145 to something lower at any moment. So there's a lot that's in play right now. And part of what is happening currently is not a lot of things coming in and paying that tariff. It's it not coming in right now. So what the economic effect that I think is more realistic that we are going to see is not necessarily higher prices on cheap goods on Amazon, but rather just shortages or things just not being sold. Because a lot of times retailers, if you don't have a ton of overhead in your market to raise your prices and nobody else is uniformly doing it, you are just killing your business by raising your prices by 145%. So You're going to keep it lower, even if it is more painful, or you'd rather things be out of stock than much more expensive. So then you lower it later. It's more in line with that. But these Temu, Shein, and Amazon Haul, that they don't have a warehousing situation. They don't have the ability to move it from one place to another or hold it and just hope that by the time the Q3 rolls around, things are in a different scenario. Like the GDP came out and it was down today. Part of the reason why it was down, even though some of the underlying stuff wasn't horrible, was because you had a lot of front running of people who were looking to get ahead of the tariffs that were importing a ton of stuff because they saw that Donald Trump won the election and they're like, well, I don't know how big the tariffs are going to be, but they're going to be more than they were today. So let's get those slow boats to China moving as fast as possible because they want to bring stuff onshore so they can clear customs. That's going to run out. And we're going to see other stuff in the general sense of it. But these direct shipping sites, they are affected the fastest because they're not shipping your necklace until you pay for it.
But that's also the same with a lot of the individual sellers. Like these people with the backpack, they don't have a warehouse either. Like they've set up a whole business through Amazon and they're just as affected. But because they're not as big, we don't seem to be having a conversation about them. Like their entire business is at risk because they also can't wait until the third quarter to not sell what they're selling. So it's like, we're only talking about Temu and Amazon Haul. I frankly don't give a shit. I give more of a shit of these smaller vendors that have done nothing wrong and have no way to tell their customers, we are not trying to raise the price, but like, if we don't do this, we go out of business. Like I'm more concerned about them.
They do have a warehouse. It's Amazon. Amazon's I've sold through Amazon before. So I'm presuming that my experience is similar to theirs because there's only one Amazon experience. But Amazon warehouses your items for free as long as they are selling at a certain clip. Now,
so what happens when your backpack is $175?
Those backpacks will not be $175 if they import in now. Right now, most everybody that I know that is in this world, and I've been in contact with a few of them, they are all waiting and crossing their fingers and living and dying on every fart that comes out of the White House, because they are hoping that they're going to be able to send these things in a better capacity. Or, and this is a whole nother thing, the market for Chinese customs fraud right now is through the roof. Like it is.
How do I invest in that?
Whole cottage industry.
Is there like an LLC or an ETF that I can invest in for Chinese customs fraud? Because that sounds like it's going to be a booming industry moving forward. It
is huge. I got a whole download on what people are offering right now. It is ridiculous. But right now, I mean, it depends. Everybody's different. Amazon doesn't charge you for warehouse space if you are selling pretty much what they are holding within a 3 to 4 month period. And I know this because we ran afoul of it because our product was not moving fast enough. And so they then start sending you helpful reminders of like, hey, drop your price or we're going to start charging you for the space in our warehouse. It's an insane system. And I mean that positively in terms of the logistics of it. But at a certain point, you're going to start running low. And then the question is going to be, all right, do we import with this crazy tariff and then make a decision on prices? Or do we just let it go dry for a little bit and hope that this is going to be different in a few weeks, months, whatever? Trump has said 145 is likely not going to be around forever. I would say for his own political reality, double doy. But what it is eventually, who knows? Who knows?
He's just fucking with people's businesses for no good reason. It makes me so mad. Like that kind of uncertainty for people that are trying to earn a living is just, it's just so incredibly unfair.
It's also not great for investment in the United States.
Yeah.
Like if I was going to open up a factory right now, like I won't buy a flat in Edinburgh because I'm not confident the city council will honor their obligations in terms of what I can do as a foreigner like 8 years from now. If I were going to open up a factory, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to open up anything at all. Yeah, I'll digress. Just all the shit I've previously said about tariffs, Trump, all that stuff. That.
We're not wrong pod at gmail.com. It's where you need to email. Update writes, Jen, I heard a few weeks ago that you had concerns that Joe's job would require you to move, but I never heard an update. What is it?
Well, so it all turned out fine. It turns out that we have strong inclinations that they were, by calling Joe and everyone in the company back to the office 5 days a week, trying to get people to quit. It turns out, though, that they didn't realize that they had a ton of remote workers because their HR system, there was no place where it said where your employees are, like what city they're in. There was no choice for remote. So there was a city listed for all of them, whether or not they lived there or not. So like my husband was listed in Virginia. We have never lived in Virginia. So they found that out the hard way. And so what's happened in the meantime is they laid off 10% of the company. Joe's division was restructured. So instead of him managing the engineers in a third of the country, he's now managing the engineers in half the country. And he is now an official remote worker. April 1st came and went. They were silent about the return to work thing, but he's got it cleared that he's officially a remote worker. And we'll just see what happens from here. I mean, to be completely honest with you guys, one of the reasons we also want to have the digital nomad visa is we're applying under congressional dish so I'm going to be the main person and my spouse is allowed to work in the EU for the length of time that we are residents of Spain. And so if like right now they have plenty of projects, but if the well runs dry, because it is crystal clear that the Trump administration is waging a war on clean energy, we'll have the opportunity for him to look for jobs in the EU if that's what happens 2 or 3 years from now. So, but right now he's good and he's happy with his company. He loves his team and crisis averted for now. So yeah, turned out okay. And thank you for asking.
Blind Panther writes, besides being the most audacious gay bait this side of the Mississippi, Andy Heats might be the most tone-deaf man I've seen in action. Heaton occasionally has guests that actively hit on him, and he has absolutely no idea. On the occasion that I've noticed our man, the Yankee Doodle Panther, is too bashful to notice public flirtations, up to and including invitations to go out for drinks and go on vacations together. I'm not going to tell you which guest this happened with because it would ruin the joke, but I counted at least 4 women who basically asked him out and complimented him repeatedly, and he did not bat an eye.
I would sure like to know who these guests are. Because I'm thinking back and I'm like, who invited me on vacation? I feel like that would register. I don't know. I'll have to go through my back catalog. That sounds very funny. Well, like I'll get like a volunteer to just let me know when women are hitting on me.
I mean, the caller is right. Like, being your friend, you have no idea what a catch you are. You're completely unaware.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks.
Now we're worried, right? I'm just slightly befuddled when people talk about Trump as a uniquely dangerous individual, as if the last 100 years of history haven't happened. The internment of Japanese Americans, the Tuskegee experiment, eugenics programs, Waco, Ruby Ridge, civet asset forfeiture, Obama drone bombing an American. The only difference between Trump and all the presidents that did these things is that Trump doesn't hide what he is doing beside a facade of righteousness and polite behavior.
I mean, look at the stuff you just compared Trump's actions to. It's not exactly good. Trump is a unique brand of bad. And I'll admit that we've had some bad in our past. I mean, that's why I started Congressional Dish. I was horrified by the George W. Bush administration. Still am. That doesn't make anything that Trump is doing normal or okay or not scary. Like, the guy tried to stay president in 2020 in a way that no other president has. And I think the people that are concerned about Trump, it's justified. It doesn't mean that the past presidents were angels.
Heaton, the environmentalist, writes, Heaton's last bonus episode had him talking about how he's an environmentalist. A week later, he has enacted a 100% disposable plastic plate food delivery system. I love it. Heaton, you did want to carve out a little time on this episode to talk about your environmentalism. The floor is yours.
I did. I am an environmentalist, and I'm glad that the listener wrote in, and I know that the listener's being fun and cheeky, so none of this is me mad at you, just so you know. I define an environmentalist as somebody who cares about the environment and actively does things to help the environment. So on my end, I have volunteered with the Israeli National Park Service to protect endangered sea turtles. I've volunteered at 2 elephant preserves, mostly shoveling shit and planting banana trees. I was briefly a bear keeper at a Cambodian zoo. And also I go camping in national forests a lot. When I'm there, I make sure that I get rid of whatever trash I've got, but I also pick up other people's trash. Now, you would be, I think, wholly justified in responding to that with, that is a vacation where you happen to do some volunteering, and I wouldn't disagree with you. So in addition to that, since I think 2012, I've given monthly contributions to the Jane Goodall Foundation with chimp preservation. And since 2021, through my actions, there have been about 10,000 trees that have been planted on Earth. So in 2021, I calculated my presumed carbon footprint. And then I went through and I figured it's actually kind of difficult to figure out how to negate your carbon footprint. I think it's pretty easy to throw money away trying to do it, but I think I pulled it off. I went through the Eden Reforestation Project. And so as a result of that, there's about 10,000 trees on the planet that are there because I actively took money from my life to negate my carbon footprint. Now, they're saplings right now, so they're not sucking up the total adult level of carbon. Technically, I am not carbon neutral at this time because it's going to take a few years, but in 3 or 4 years, when they become proper trees, mangrove trees, I will be not just carbon neutral, but I'll be a net positive in terms of the amount of carbon out there. So by the definition of somebody that actively helps the environment, I think I'm knocking it out of the park and would probably constitute more of an environmentalist than the vast majority of people that are talking about the environment or like the environment or something like that. As far as the plastic goes, I actually think that recycling has been a net step back for impactful environmentalism. And the reason I say that is that when you talk to people that work at the EPA or are environmental scientists and you ask them, is it good to recycle? The response is almost always something to the effect of, it depends. There are situations where if you're in a city that doesn't have good recycling, they actually ship it to another city that does recycling and you end up spending carbon that you didn't need to do. Sometimes we would just send stuff over to China where they would tell us that they would recycle it, but they wouldn't. There are places that recycle it. If you're in a big city that really cares about it, chances are they actively do it. But even then, it doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. It's just, it's not particularly impactful. It feels good. People really like recycling programs. It's why they're very popular. But when you go to your city and you try to find out, like, what do you do with my plastic? What do you do with my aluminum? A lot of the time, it's very opaque and difficult to do because they kind of know, like, look, people just really like this. It makes them feel good, but it may not actually do a whole lot. And so I think we've had a whole generation of people that have basically been taught, if you recycle, if you sort your garbage in a fractionally beneficial way, you did it. You did your part. Congratulations. And I'm here to tell you, it's not enough. It doesn't really do anything. And I'm not worried about plastic that much. This weekend when I was up in Maine, I took Wallace to a dog park, this beautiful dog park in Maine. There was a giant solar panel installation that we walked past. We circumnavigated the whole solar panel installation. It was all built on top of a field, on top of a landfill, because we figured this out some time ago. Landfills, they put a layer down that like a plastic hermetic layer that stops stuff from seeping into the groundwater. They put a bunch of junk in, and then eventually they just cap it and they put in a playground like where I used to live in New York, or they put in solar panels like where I just was. So I would say for folks that are truly concerned about the environment, you should be focused on impact rather than flavor. And I'm focused on impact. And I think that I'm walking the walk. And I think I can claim that I'm an environmentalist.
I agree with that. And I absolutely love the thing about planting all the trees. I think that's super cool, Andrew. And I'd actually like more information about that. I think the plastic plate thing, I guess my question is with it is like, why would you, it seems wasteful to me because you know that's going to a landfill. It's not even an attempted of, recycling it. It's going to a landfill and it's every single time you eat. So I guess for me, I'm just wondering as an environmentalist, why you wouldn't just buy a plate, a bowl and wash it.
So two things. The main thing would be, I think when you're getting into like what I'm going to call impactful environmentalism, you need to be concerned with, what are the actual metrics here? So I'll say this is out of date information. This has probably changed, but John Tierney had an article about recycling in the New York Times maybe 10 years ago. And like one of the things he brought up in there was if you buy a ceramic mug, the amount of carbon that they use to create that mug is equal to about 1,000 plastic cups. So if you're concerned about carbon, it would actually be better to do the plastic cups than it would be to get the ceramic mug. That's probably changed now. If you're getting it in America and you're getting it from a place that has green energy, it wouldn't be the same, of course. If you're getting it from Malaysia, probably coal powered. So I'm more focused on harm and outcome than I am on like flavor. I think a lot of the time with environmentalism, we get focused on almost like a spiritual dimension to it. Of there are things that are an affront versus things that are good. With the plastic stuff, it's there. But again, like I don't think landfills are that bad. I think they would be if what was happening was we were taking the plastic and we were just dumping it in the middle of a city or the middle of a field or dumping it in the ocean. I would have a very different perspective on this. But as it is now, they put it in a big pit and then they fill it up and it doesn't hurt anything. So I don't think it's a huge deal.
See, I don't really agree that it's not hurting anything. When it's in the landfill, if it was a paper plate, that's way less toxic to the air than burning plastic. So it's not, and I don't think this is a flavor thing. I think this is a waste thing. It's generating unnecessary waste. So that's what, and like I say this as someone who goes out of my way to not use paper and plastic things if I don't have to. Like I travel with a little bamboo silverware kit so that I'm not constantly throwing out plastic. So this is something that like I go out of my way as a traveler to generate less waste. So to hear that you're at home and just burn, like not just like using disposable plates, but plastic ones in particular, I think that's why some of us that heard that went like, I still love you regardless, but
Jen,
it's
no, I applaud that you're doing stuff, right? Because like the people that piss me off are the environmentalists that don't do anything because they're not real environmentalists. I'm not putting you in that camp, by the way. There are people that do that I've met where like they have a Fern Gully shirt and that's it. That's their great contribution. So if you're actively doing things in your life, then that's great. I applaud that. And like we're on the same team. I'll note I got lots of very helpful advice from people following that statement on the show that have convinced me I need to get a tabletop dishwasher, which I plan to do. So this is probably a one-time purchase. The amount of plastic that has been purchased is about the size of a shoebox. So I don't really think it's that big of a deal. There's a point to be made in terms of the wasteful stuff, but my thing would always be like, what are you worried about? I'm worried about carbon and I'm worried about water. In terms of just stuff in landfills, I don't think if they were burning it, I guess, but my understanding is they're just putting it in a big hole and shoving dirt on top of it. Like it's like landfills are not a huge deal now. You might be able to talk me out of that, but in terms of like my priorities of what I'm worried about, climate change is the top one. Water is the second one. Landfills just aren't a big threat. They're not something that I'm terribly worried about.
Well, just remember that plastic is a fossil fuel. So the drilling and the, all of the processing of it to make those plastic plates, like it's a part of the equation. So
hell yeah,
that's true. And Jen, that's the way to reach me. That is totally the way to do it. Like for somebody that thinks like me, being able to go, hey, you're using hydrocarbons from the fossil fuel process. That's going to produce more carbon than if you get plates or like paper plates, paper plates. We're using it from these like that. That is a very, very strong argument. And again, gang, like I'm probably going to do this one time. Again, if you take all this plastic, it's about the size of a shoebox. Like I don't like if you add up all the shit we as Americans buy on a regular basis, all the packaging material you have, I don't think it's significantly different. But this is a strong argument for people like me that think like me, being able to think about like, what are the constituent parts? What are the calculable impacts? That's a very strong argument. But the one that I like start to recoil from when I hear people is like, and this is not you, but like people will just kind of go like, well, like this thing is holy and this thing is profane. Plastic's inherently an affront to the environment because it's artificial, whereas like hemp is from a plant, so it's good. I'm like, well, now we're into like spiritual territory, and I am much more concerned with impact. So, you know what? How about this, gang? I promise I won't buy any more plastic disposable plates. I'm going to get the washing machine. There's a certain question there too of like, what is the amount of water that it will consume? What is the amount of power that it will consume? It might still be potentially better, depending where I am, to use plastic, but we'd have to make those calculations. My overall thing is I'd say whatever I'm doing is probably not going to make a ding compared to the 10,000 trees that I've planted. But I like where everybody's head's at, because where I want people to be is I think we got to worry about this. And I think we personally have to worry about this. And so if we're all figuring out how we can do a better job, then I'm happy.
My biggest thing is your mental health deteriorating to the point that you can't wash a fucking dish. So like that's my number one thing. So
yeah.
And yeah, I think
washing dishes sucks by hand. I'm with Andrew on this.
Mother Nature is here to kill us. We either subjugate her or we're all dead. So that's my take on it. There is no Mother Gaia. There is no coming to communion with this fake fucking bullshit. We need to chain this idea to a radiator and make her do what we want. Heaton would love the Masters, writes. As an avid golf fan, here are some tidbits about the tournament that I picked up over the years, and I really think that he would enjoy it. Number one, the course was built on a tree nursery with each hole named after a tree or flower. Hole 1 is tea olive. Hole 5 is magnolia. Number 2, there's an annual pre-tournament dinner for past champions, and the most recent champion gets to choose the menu. Number 3, unlike other tournaments, all caddies have to wear distinct white jumpsuits rather than golf clothes. Number 4, amateurs who qualify for the tournament get to sleep in a room at the top of the clubhouse called the Crow's Nest for a week. Number 5, any past champion is allowed to play. This year, a 65-year-old and a 67-year-old participated. Number 6, it's the only major tournament played at the same course every year, and parts of the course have fun names like Amen Corner, Rays Creek, and Hogan's Bridge. And number 7, the winner gets an iconic green jacket, which they're allowed to wear outside the course during their reign as champion, but after that, they can only wear it inside the club.
So there's lots of costumery and arcane rules. I'm into this. This sounds great. This might be my sport. Thank you, Lester.
And inflation resistant menu. That's like one of the famous things is that they have the chicken pimento sandwich is like $1.50.
I like the idea that people who are participating in the Masters are like, I'm only doing it if coffee's what I paid in 1960.
Basically.
These people I assume are very, very wealthy. But okay, good. I like that too.
World War Gen Z writes, I was born in 97, making me one of the first Zoomers ever minted. From this lofty perch, I look at the Zoomers that came after me, and I can see that there is clearly a Gen Z 1.0 and a Gen Z 2.0. Gen Z 1.0 graduated high school pre-COVID, had flip phones before iPhones, grew up with Instagram but without TikTok, started college during Trump 1, and came of age when the Women's March, the March for Our Lives, BLM, were all part of the zeitgeist. Very much a radical Bernie-crat crowd by wide margins. Gen Z 2.0 graduated high school post-COVID. They've only known smartphones. TikTok is formative. They started college in the Biden era, and they came of age with COVID restrictions and masking requirements. And for them, MAGA is the counterculture. Very much the free speech, anti-woke crowd by wide margins. My peer group have discussed this split at length, and there are other reasons for it that we've come up with that aren't worth mentioning, save for the one that I mentioned only because it's funny. The biggest difference between Gen Z 1.0 and 2.0 is that 2.0 can't read a book.
Oh my God.
I've read a bunch of pieces from professors that are like apoplectic about this, that are like, I'm telling you, I've been here for 30 years and like kids can't read books now. Like they don't have the attention span. And it feeds the old man part of my brain, because the old man part of my brain is like, good, it'll be at least another 30 years before these little fucks push me off the cliff. But also I'm always worried that like, no, Garrison Keillor had this great analogy years ago of like, as you get older, it's like you want to stand on the precipice of a cliff and look over it. Like that's your goal. You want to get to the cliff and look over the top, but also everybody else is trying to get there and they're trying to push you. So you get there and you're like, no, I'm not ready to be pushed yet. Like that's how aging works. So part of it is like
the group that pushed him all said in unison, me too.
Little twerps. But I'm also always worried about the old man, like all old men always think teenagers are self-absorbed, narcissistic, and insufficiently respect their elders. So it's hard for me to figure out where the latitude is. What I do think is really interesting about what you brought up, and I do think there's something to it, is that MAGA is counterculture. Like, I think that that's accurate. Like, if you want to go, I'm not punk rock. I'm talking to you right now. Today's the first day where I've taken out my linens. I have my wool closet and my linen closet. I'm about as far from punk rock as you can get. But if you're punk rock, MAGA would be the way to go. And so I can totally see how if you're going to be rebellious middle finger kid in middle school, Trump would be who you rally around. Like that seems to me a side effect of if the cultural establishment of Hollywood and universities are very Obama woke liberals, you would go if you wanted to fight the man, you would do it by going full MAGA. How that translates, though, as people get older, I don't know. I don't really buy any of these stats. When people say like the incoming millennials are the most socialist generation in history, that was like stuff that happened maybe 10 years ago. Millennials are the most socialist people in history. Maybe. I don't know. I think that there are going to be certain events that do like have a touchstone moment for generations like 9/11 or like COVID. But I think I don't know, buying a house, starting a business. These are things that are going to change how people view the economy. Graduating high school, like not being mad at dad anymore. That's stuff that's going to change as well. So I think stuff kind of remains in a state of flux politically.
Heaton, have you paid attention? This feels like a political orphanage episode. At the literacy rates and core competency becoming the strongest in like Mississippi and Louisiana.
What?
Really?
Yeah, this is recent stuff. I would love for you to dig into it to find out how real it is. But this is stuff that crossed my my radar. And part of it is because for a lot of like phonics training, there was like a movement about 20 years ago that went to a different way to teach kids how to read and teach kids how to speak. And it was widely adopted in a lot of our biggest cities and a lot of our biggest states. It was recognized as a failure faster in places that already had poor public education. And so they switched away from it earlier. And now they have better literacy rates than some of our biggest states. And when you look at this anecdotal example of somebody saying, all right, well, these kids don't know how to read a book. Part of it is because our largest population centers are terrible at teaching our kids how to read.
It could also be correlations with who has smartphones at what age. Like, I don't know, but it could be that if you're in In Oregon, you're more likely to have access to a smartphone earlier than if you're in Mississippi, maybe. Like Mississippi's pretty consistently the lowest state in the union in terms of GDP. But there too, with education rates, it gets really complicated really quick. So like Oklahoma, where I'm from, is usually in the bottom 10. But like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana tend to be pretty low. But then it's this other thing too, where when you look at like, when you subdivide it by race.
You would say smartphones would affect literacy?
I could totally see that.
Yes.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Like if
the ability to read.
Yes.
I think the ability to, I'm going to say more reading comprehension and attention span. But if we're looking at like ability to read a book and think about it and digest it, like I could totally see smartphones being inversely correlated with that.
Yeah, when I was younger,
I don't know if that was the stat that I was quoting,
but it was just like pure like actual just like ability to read
literacy. Yeah,
I mean I think we've got pretty high literacy across the country, right? Like am I wrong in this? Just the ability.
I don't know. This
read.
is why I'd be curious for you to look into it.
Yeah. But I think being literate takes practice. And I think one of the reasons I was so good at it is that I was bored. So when I was a kid, I would just read books in my room. Yeah. If I had a smartphone, I'm watching videos about dogs and cats and shit. Like I'm not going to be reading as many books as I was. And so I can see this younger generation. And like I've seen from the kids in my own life, like they got their phones pretty young, tablets and all that kind of stuff. Like they're not as bored and as, book hungry as I was when I was younger. So I could see a correlation for sure. It just makes sense to me. And one thing about the email that I hadn't really considered, but I'm interested in the division of Gen Z, because where you divided it based on which Gen Zers graduated high school before and post-COVID, the post-COVID crowd, they got robbed, man. They didn't get to do, like the seniors that missed their entire senior year, like they really lost something there. And I can imagine being really angry about it and being mad at the side that caused the lockdowns and caused them to spend the end of their high school experience at home. I could see them getting political about that, whether or not they actually know or care what Trump's policies are, just being like, fuck you, I lost out on my high school experience. That makes a lot of sense to me too. 100%. And it's interesting that generation is talking about it.
It was like, and at the time back, I try not to think about 2020 at all if I can avoid it. But at the time, there were all of these, like all of us that were in lockdown, there were these stories that would circulate about the people that were ignoring lockdown. And like people are, and they kind of indicated that there were these like vast networks of people having super fun while you're here. When I talked to people that were in high school and college during lockdown, and I'm like, so what were you getting up to? Was it fun? Were you like, like you guys were sneaking out? And they're like, no, we, me and my friends, we had like a ring that we would play Call of Duty or whatever the equivalent was on. It's like, we did a lot of that. We did a lot of video games. We'd share Zoom. And it's like, oh, you just had a shitty, you were on lockdown. But like in a year of your life that you will remember the rest of your life. Like, I don't remember the fuck I did 2 years ago. But you remember your senior year, like college, senior year of college is a fucking blast. It's like your junior year is when you do all the shit. Senior year, you're like, I got to go to one class. That's it. And then I just have this year to run amok on a college campus. And you're like, nah, you don't get to do that. You got to stay home. Yeah. Like, no, I'd be super pissed if I were you guys. I would be angry about that.
But even more so being in high school, because your parents control your level of freedom. Like if you're in college, you can be like, well, this rule's stupid. I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go surfing, or I'm going to do whatever. And I think one of the reasons that COVID was cool for me is that I found out that I wasn't allowed to go hiking 8 months after I started hiking. Like I was just doing it. And like, if I broke the law, who cares? But if I had been living in my parents' house, they would have prohibited me from going outside. So it's like, they didn't have the freedom to make the decisions that we made based on the science and being safe. Like they had to stay home. They were actually locked down for that pivotal time in their lives. So, it's interesting to see how that affects their politics now. And I love that email. Thanks for writing in.
I hope it makes that whole generation skeptical of authority in general. I think that's very healthy.
It probably will.
On Harvard, too liberal writes, am I missing something about the Ivy League being too liberal? Trump is an Ivy graduate. Vance is an Ivy graduate. W. Bush, Cruz, Clocher. I don't know who Clocher is supposed to be. Bannon, Hegseth, and countless more. How exactly are these colleges stifling conservatives?
I don't think they are. I think conservatives just see themselves as victims in a lot of different ways. And Yeah. I think they also don't if you look at conservative ideology, a lot of times it just doesn't match up with what is taught in college. I mean, I think they reject fossil fuel science. And if you're a scientist in college, you're not going to find that it jives with what you were taught as a conservative. There's religious stuff that's just not going to fly. Like, you're going to be taught that Jesus wasn't the basis of, you're going to be taught about the Big Bang Theory, and it's not going to match the Bible. So I think the more educated you get in certain fields, it just doesn't match your ideology because your ideology isn't facts.
They're just dumb religious nuts.
Sometimes.
I'm going to take a similar but very different tact. If you have a shitty idea that doesn't work in real life, the two places you can be shielded from it are academia and religion. If you've got an idea that just doesn't work, go into academia or go into religion, because those are two places where your ideas having a bad outcome and your career are completely orthogonal to one another. So you've always had a division there. You're not going to find a lot of people that are entrepreneurial minded that go into academia for personality reasons. It's just not, it's not going to attract a lot of them. I think where I'll side with the conservatives on this to a point is I think there's always been for a variety of reasons, a bias of progressives or liberals that are in faculty compared to conservatives. For whether it's more the Thomas Sowell take that I have or Jen's self-selection that she's positing. That number has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. Like, it used to be in a given English department, history department, anthropology department, maybe like 1 out of 5 people would be conservative. They would describe themselves as conservative. In the last 10, 20 years, that number is like now 1 out of 30, 1 out of 60, maybe like 1 out of 4,020 if you get into sociology. So like it has really, really changed. I think where the conservative bias comes from, I don't consider myself a conservative, but what irks me about the Ivy League and academia in general is I do think that there's this tendency to become a kind of theology, like a kind of seminary of there are these abstract ideas that we all agree are holy and good. And we're going to get into the really, really how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type stuff. And that kind of crowds out other viewpoints. So I do think some of that's there. And the way to handle it, I think, is to approach it systemically rather than what the Trump administration is doing, which is taking pot shots at individual colleges they don't like, which I don't think is the way to do it.
A manufacturing engineer with no degree writes, I agree with Jen that there are occupations and fields where credentials are important. Doing it through a college is an overly expensive way to accomplish that. And I think that she is overly confident about the quality of these credentialed people coming out of these colleges. Having come from a nationally recognized engineering institution, I can tell you that 80% of the people graduating from the engineering college are not the kind of people I would trust with serious safety concerns coming directly out of school. Most companies hire fresh graduates expecting multiple years of in-house training for them to be high-performing employees.
I mean, most companies hire fresh graduates. I mean, that's the point right there. Of course, you need on-the-job training, but there's basics that need to be done. Like, before you can get into engineering, you need to know math. So it's like, that's what the schooling is for. And so you're getting the basics there, and then you get more. Like, my husband didn't go straight into managing half the country for an international energy company. He started in some dude's garage that he was learning from for energy efficiency stuff, and he worked up from there. So, like, of course, on-the-job training is incredibly important. And I do know that for a lot of, like, Kim Kardashian, she's training to be a lawyer. I don't know if she's still doing this, but she was doing it in a way where, she was doing it through tutoring. There are other paths. So while I know college isn't necessary, college does have a function in our society. And I think right now, because of the frustrations we have, there is a reflexive move to just shit all over it. I'm just trying to be the voice in the conversation that says there is value here and it does have a role. So it's like, you're not wrong. On the job training is important, but like, you got your basics from school. And that's why these companies look for people that have degrees and don't go straight to high schoolers for the people that they're hiring.
I agree college has value. I don't think college is bad. I do think we have increasingly as a society decided to use colleges as a certification process rather than their primary function, which is teaching people how to think and distributing knowledge, which is a good thing. There are probably going to be some cases where I would go, yeah, you need to have some kind of gatekeeper function in a college, but I think that they're exceptional rather than the rule. So law school is a great example. I'm glad Jen brings up Kim Kardashian. That's not where my head was going to go, but she's actually a really good example of this. If you can pass the bar, you should be an attorney, period. You don't need to go to law school. That was the case for most of American history. Abraham Lincoln didn't go to law school. He passed the bar. He became an attorney. There's only 2 states that I'm aware of right now where you can do that. And if you can do that, by the way, you're probably a fucking genius. If you can self-teach yourself law through however you cobble it together, through tutoring and a bunch of books that you read by yourself and podcasts, and then you sit down, you take the bar exam and you pass it, you're probably really goddamn smart. And I would be open to hiring you as my attorney. That's not the case in most of the country. In most of the country, 48 states, I think, maybe this has changed. 48 states, they go, no, you have to attend law school and then you get to pass the bar. What I'm saying is you don't need to have the law school be a requirement. It's a very, very good method for most people to educate themselves to the point where they could pass the bar. I don't want to get rid of it, but I don't want it to be the exclusive way to get there. For other things like medicine, I would imagine you probably do need to take particular classes before you can pass a licensing thing. I'm not confident you need to have an undergraduate degree before you do that. One of the reasons that we have higher costs in terms of law and in terms of medicine in the United States is that we make you go through 4 years of undergraduate. They don't do that in other countries for law. If you're in the Netherlands or you're in the United Kingdom, you want to go to law school, just go to law school. You don't have to go to 4 years of undergraduate. It might be nice for you as a person, but it's not required for you vocationally. So I don't know. I think it might entirely be possible that you just go to med school and there might be some amount of classes that you have there. And then for liberal arts, which is where I am, that's where my heart is. I didn't do any hard sciences. I think the sum total of hard sciences I did in undergraduate, I took a botany class that I remember, and I took a math for idiots class or whatever, where I did learn a bunch of logical fallacies. It was actually very good for my line of work. I learned a lot of logical fallacies through there. It was terrific. But for me as a liberal arts major, though, who genuinely enjoys all the bullshit that I talk about on a regular basis, who's made a career out of it, I didn't need to have a degree as a certificate for that. And I maintain my position of, like, for liberal arts, if we as a society go, this is just a wonderful thing everybody should have access to, then we shouldn't be telling people they're too stupid to have access to it. I think that that's deeply classist. And this is my primary problem with the way we run higher ed in the country is I think it is classist. And I think that it ends up becoming a sorting mechanism for people along class lines and a kind of nascent caste system. I don't like that bit. And I think that, like, for professors, I like professors. Professors, I want people to be taking your classes because they want to be in your class. I don't want them to take your class because they think they get a certificate at the end of it that entitles them to X rung on the socioeconomic ladder. So I think there are good ways to do this, and we ought to be thinking about how to take the pressure off of universities as being certification centers and putting it on other things like the Bar Association.
I'll agree with you on the undergraduate degrees because it seems like for a lot of jobs where they're not necessary, they are being required. So for a lot of students now, it feels like as required as high school is, except high school is public. And college, in a lot of cases, you have to go into debt to the bankers for. So that's why I think it feels so scammy to people, because you have to be in debt for the rest of your life just to get some job where you don't need it. And honestly, I'm sitting in one of those jobs. Yeah, like I taught myself how to podcast using other podcasts, Daniel J. Lewis's The Audacity to Podcast. Thank you, Daniel. But that's how I learned. And college gave me the ability to see the patterns that I see, and that, business law, that class helped me a lot with like reading bills and stuff. But these are things that I do think I could have figured out on my own. College just gave me a very big shortcut. But I do think that the undergraduate degree becoming a qualification for a McDonald's worker, like that's the part where it's like, okay, like we're taking this a little too far. And if we actually want to require people go to school until they're 22, we need to make it public and make it so that they're not going broke in order to do it. I also just I went to college twice. I went to the University of Oklahoma and I went to the University of Edinburgh, and I have a lot of friends in academia. So it's not, I definitely have some hostility, but it's not across the board. I think we made a really, really, really big misstep in American society around 1960, 1970, where we ceased to think college is a way to become educated, and we made it the way to become educated. And that was a big problem. So like
elevate out of middle class. That was specifically the idea, and it was the Army GI Bill plus the proliferation of universities.
We spent 3 generations telling everybody, if you want to become middle class, you have to get a college degree, and if you don't, guess you're just kind of a loser. Like we didn't come up with anything else. And like I think the healthy way to look at it is like this. This is how we should look at college. If you speak Latin, that is very impressive. Congratulations that you speak Latin. Like I bet you're very intelligent. If you know Latin, you're probably very well educated. You're not an idiot if you don't speak Latin. No one on this panel knows Latin. We're all educated, intelligent people. None of us know Latin. That's how we should look at college degrees. It is impressive if you have a college degree. It means that there's a certain level of education that you've obtained. Congratulations. There are other ways to obtain education. It is not the exclusive way to obtain knowledge and education. Actually, it is the easiest time in all of human history to obtain incredible amounts of education. You could, half the university courses at the Ivy League are available to download for free as a podcast. Like when I was doing a job doing data entry right out of college, it was very boring. I didn't like it. I'm not designed for data entry. I listened to an entire semester's worth of classes from Stanford for free while I was doing that. So it's weird in that now is the easiest time in all of human history to obtain education, and it's also the most classist we've ever been about the specific form that you have to obtain that education. And I want to break those links. I want people to have access to education. I don't want to hold people back, and I don't want a bullshit caste system. That's the thing that offends me. I don't want a socioeconomic caste system where college becomes the magical Harry Potter hat that tells you for the rest of your life where you get to stack up in a pyramid.
That's fair.
Burn it all down. Closeted college professor brings us on home. There are plenty of us in the higher education faculty who are cheering on the Trump administration's effort against Harvard in regards to diversity of opinion. As someone who has been in the crosshairs of these institutions for the last 15 years of my 15-year career for not being quote unquote liberal enough, having the shoe on the other foot is rewarding. Politically, I'm closest to Andrew, but that's not enough for many of my fellow employees as it extends to every level of politics. Support your Republican friend for county office. You're suddenly off the schedule for a term or two. Ask the union to spend more time figuring out employment issues instead of working on election stuff, and you'll get your classes cut from, quote, our token conservative to make budget.
I've heard that from a bunch of people. Entirely possible that you're right and that you get discriminated against, which is horrible. This is one of my other big problems with universities is I don't think they really believe in diversity. I think they believe in tokenism. I think when you actually what if we had diversity of opinion? They're like, no, we don't want diversity of opinion. We want one idea that we spread around racially. So I think that the right idea, and we don't want a lot of competing ideas. I think you're onto that. Where I will push back though is I think that your experience is legitimate and shitty, and I'm sorry about that. I don't want the response to this to just be given black eyes to specific universities that piss us off. I think the way to handle it is systemically. And so just like if the way to do it is just like try to piss off Harvard by taking away their nonprofit, like systemic change is good. Arbitrary pushback against the people we don't like authoritarian. And I don't go that direction.
Yeah, it's kind of gross. I mean, this just reeks again of like conservative victimhood. You've been there for 15 years. How bad can it possibly be? I don't know, dude.
You like it. Just admit that you like it, dude. You've been there for 15 years.
It's just like this whole thing. This idea that we need to have conservatives in education. Like one of the most offensive things that I've ever discovered is that John Yoo, the author of the W. Bush torture memos, is or maybe was definitely, I don't know if he still is, but he's a professor at Berkeley of all places. So in order to have this ideological diversity, you have a fucking monster who justified torture in ways that everyone who knows things thinks are illegal, but we have that diversity of thought. Great. You're teaching kids how to make torture legal.
More conservatives, let's get the torture guy.
Yeah. It's is that really what we want here? Is the torture guy in school? Yeah. John Yoo was a professor at Berkeley.
Feels like a bit of a straw professor.
Yeah. Berkeley professor, John Yoo. It's disgusting. So it's I don't know. I'm tired of the conservatives claiming to be victims all the time. You're obviously there. We had another person write in with a very good point that all of these conservatives are graduating out of Ivy League schools. You're allowed there and you're still conservative when you get out. So it's just stop with the fucking crying already. I'm so sick of it. professor.
Up and sit down, conservatives.
Well, I don't know. You're allowed to be there for 15 years. They haven't kicked you out. So
no, I think it's loud and clear. Shut up and sit down.
Or just teach whatever nonsense you're going to teach to your kids. You're employed. Like, you're there.
You don't think that they're worried about getting fired?
15 years, he's still there. So apparently not.
I would be curious.
He's self-censoring to do it.
I'm going to make work for Justin. Sorry, Justin. I would be curious with my political opinions. Would I have a difficult time getting tenure as a professor? Would there be any friction? If anybody has any insight on this, I'd like to hear from you.
I think you'd be perfectly fine.
I mean, this guy is saying he's basically Andrew and he's had to self-censor his entire career.
It doesn't sound like he's self-censoring. It sounds like he's telling the unions to stop their election stuff. Like, maybe your colleagues don't like you because you're the type of guy that writes into podcasts to shit on higher education. Like, I don't know. There might be reasons why you're being discriminated against that aren't your conservative ideology. Like, I don't know.
So he's just a bad person.
I don't think he's a bad person.
Not only are they dumb religious nuts, they're also bad people.
I could just see ways that this person is annoying, going up to the unions and be like, get back to your worker stuff. Don't do your election stuff. Like, oh, it's just in the email. I'm like, I could see reasons why people are like, that guy. Like, you're telling us that you are asking unions to do things differently when, as a conservative,
his union.
Yeah, he probably doesn't believe the union should exist. Like, that's probably not popular with people in the union. Like, conservative ideologies, like, there's ways that you're annoying that have nothing to do with... Yeah, I don't know. It's just, we've had a lot of conservative victimhood in this episode, and I'm just, like I said, I'm tired of it. So.
Yeah, stop complaining, idiots.
They have the presidency, the House, the Senate. They're attacking universities, and it's like, oh, but people are mean to us. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, just stop.
I don't imagine that this guy would be a Trump fan.
I don't know who this guy is. It's just like another, like, you have all the power.
Politically, Andrew has not been a red hat conservative.
Yeah.
No, but he's still like saying that he's cheering on the idea of Trump taking on Harvard and trying to control their ideological bent of their students and their faculties. If you're cheering that on, you're not someone I want in higher education.
Hotbed of anti-Semitism, according to their own report, though, today. Harvard.
They're ridiculous. They're just trying to crack down on protesters. We know what that is.
Did you read the report? I only got like 5 pages.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm still like, technically, I'm still not working. So
yeah, they released their campus anti-Semitism report.
Okay, I didn't read it. I don't know. But I still don't think...
That's what they said. They said that they were a hotbed for anti-Semitism.
The topic I do know about is the one we talked about last week. The Trump administration trying to control the ideological bent of students and faculty. If you're cheering that on, I don't think you should be faculty, quite frankly.
Get out. So you should be fired. You're a religious nut and an idiot who's also a bad person. And
I didn't say any of those things. I said what I said, Justin.
I don't know. Tape is the tape.
Yeah, I don't care. Conservatives, keep fucking crying in the emails, and I'll keep telling you suck.
We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Our editor is Will Saddleberg. On the Politics program, we talked about the Canadian election on an early episode that came out. And, I also talked about the White House Correspondents Association dinner and the Pope. Had a big, long conversation about the Pope with our friend Kevin Ryan as we come up to the
psychedelic Catholic.
Yeah, huge Catholic. And I watched the first 20 minutes of Conclave before I fell asleep on the plane last night.
I liked Conclave. I thought it was a fun film. And I watched
I thought it was a great way to do like as soon as I got into it and I'm like, oh, this is like a locked room mystery. Like this is a real cool, a real cool way to do like a locked room mystery story.
I liked the Two Popes as well with Anthony Hopkins and the guy that played the Great Sparrow on Game of Thrones. Oh, that was good. This is about 6 years old now, but that was, I thought, pretty good.
Did you see that Trump floated himself for the next Pope and that Lindsey Graham said that's a great idea?
That man likes to talk. I don't know if you picked up on it, but if you ask him about anything, he will give an opinion.
Yeah. And his opinion is Trump would be perfect. All the divorces and the porn star fucking, that's exactly what the Pope would.
I mean, are you aware of the historical record of popes?
I don't follow the papacy.
Trump
actually.
became Pope, I think I would shift into the evangelical end times camp. I think at that point I'd be like, if a non-Catholic dude, on top of everything else that we know about, who's very popular, like I would say that if any non-Catholic becomes Pope, possibly Antichrist material. Maybe I go back and read Left Behind.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would love to hear him read a Latin prayer in his accent. Canun Domine
omnibus cursed heo, very heo Emil.
Heaton Orphanage.
We're doing AI shit on the orphanage this week. I talked to a guy about things you might not have thought of that AI is going to change in the future. And it's also a how to stay abreast of AI episode. I think that we are at the bottom of a very tall hill, and I'm trying to stay on top of AI. I'm even a tad nervous. I know people in the industry that are integrating AI right now in a way that I'm not. I don't know how other people are feeling, but if you're feeling a little insecure and I'm feeling a little insecure, this is a good episode about like, what can you do to stay abreast of AI as it changes and develops?
Jen?
And I watched 2 hearings for the latest congressional dish that were about the Supreme Court decisions that overturned the Chevron deference, which, essentially says that where there's ambiguity in laws, that the agencies get to fill that in. And so the Supreme Court really changed that. And so there was a hearing specifically about that. And then there was another one in the Veterans Administration where we got more like specific examples of how that affects people. And so since we were I know that we actually did an episode about that, or at least it was one of our topics, but to hear the discussion of the experts with Congress saying like, this is how you're going to have to change how you're doing your job. And so I listened to the advice that Congress was given, and, spoiler alert, Congress isn't taking it, but it does.
It basically is going to require Congress to do their job.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the takeaway?
Yeah.
It's like Congress, you don't get to go, EPA, just make water clean. You can't do that anymore. You now have to say like, okay, it can't be above X amounts per, X thousand units of arsenic per what. You got to do all that shit now.
Yeah. And there were like specific metrics that were suggested by these witnesses that I could go and check and see if they're being done. And so that's what I did. And it was also just an episode to warn people from here on forward on Congressional Dish, I need to look at these laws differently. And I'm going to be referring back to, previously, this is what would happen. But now, because of this hole that I can see, like I'm going to have to look for holes in the laws in the way that I wasn't having to before. So it was just kind of like it's a prepping episode for what we have going forward, because I'm going to have to read these completely differently than I have. Me and everyone else who analyzes legislation. So that's what's waiting for you. I know, literally, it sometimes feels that way.
What are you talking about?
But in podcasting, it might just be me.
It's like you and maybe, I don't know, one or two.
Well, that'll wrap it up for us today. For Andrew Heaton and Jen Briney, I'm Justin Robert Young, reminding you that we're not wrong.
Spain is.
Ooh.
Did a callback. See?
Dog and Pony Show audio.